Hello, everyone, and welcome to our interview series. Today, our guests are Rick Rouse and Paul Ingram. They're authors of a book called The World is About to Turn, Mending a Nation's Broken Faith. Dr. Paul Ingram is Professor Emeritus of Religion at Pacific Lutheran University. He served as the president of the Northwest chapter of the American Academy of Religion. Most recently, he's facilitated a series of forums in the greater Seattle area between members of a Muslim congregation and people from various Christian churches. And he's the author of numerous books, including Wrestling with God and Faith as Remembering. Reverend Dr. Rick Rouse has taught practical theology at both the undergraduate level and graduate level in the U.S. and Germany. He's a certified spiritual director and ordained Lutheran pastor for 45 years, serving congregations in Arizona, California, Oregon, and Washington. He's taught at Luther Seminary and also at Pacific Lutheran. And he's the author of numerous publications, including Beyond Church Walls, Cultivating a Culture of Care, and Fire of Grace, The Healing Power of Forgiveness. So it's really great to have both of you guys here with us today. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the book and what prompted you to write
it. Well, Paul and I were at Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma for about 11 years. We overlapped, and we recently reconnected in retirement here in the North Seattle area in Mukilteo, and we were looking for a project. And in the months following the 2016 election, it seemed that we were a nation that was increasingly divided, that we had lost the ability for civil discourse and had become so polarized that it was difficult for people to work for the common good. And we thought we needed to address the situation. Paul, why don't you share a little bit about how we got this started?
Well, when we talked about the book, I suggested that we shouldn't just focus on the Christian tradition, but we might want to bring other non-Christian traditions into a dialogue on the question that the book addresses. How are we going to get people to learn to live together peacefully and harmoniously? Now that question comes from Islam, but it seems to me it counts everywhere. Because that's exactly not what we're doing now. And so when Rick and I talked about the book, he thought I should focus the theme of the book in a conversation with several of the world's religions. And since I've been writing about interreligious dialogue and Buddhist-Christian dialogue most of my professional life, I jumped at the chance. And I've been very pleased with the outcome. Now, and I was very glad that Rick asked me to be a participant in the book. That's how I got into it. I do think that this culture is so divided that I'm frankly worried about whether or not we're ever going to be able to talk to each other and work together in a democratic way in this society. A part of it has to do with the current political leadership of the country that has been very divisive. So I have some hopes that the coming election will be a way of starting a political healing, at least, of the dualisms that haunt this culture, our society, like Chinese hungry ghosts.
So the title of the first chapter in the book is The Failure of the American Religious Experiment. How do you feel that religion's contributed to the cultural divide that we have today that you've been talking about?
Well, that's, of course, where we felt we needed to start. How did we get here? How did we become a nation so divided and so fearful about the future? And how do we move forward in hope? But we had to find out. We did some research. We obviously drew on some of Paul's great experience with history. And we discovered that religion has been used as a weapon by those in power since the beginning of this country. starting with the doctrine of discovery, which allowed Europeans to seize territory and force their religion and culture on native inhabitants. Then the idea of manifest destiny that was used to justify slavery and the genocide of Native Americans. And now today, the Christian right has politicized religion as a means to consolidate power, to demonize those who are opposed to them, even to discriminate against the LGBTQ community and others. So we wanted to address that issue. How did we get there? How has religion contributed to this situation? And it's because we've been using religion as a weapon all these years.
Yeah, this pattern has been going on in European Christianity since the fall of the Roman Empire, when there wasn't anything left except Christianity, and it became the official religion of governments and states and so on. And religion has always been used as an ideological weapon to either forcefully convert people to the, quote, one true way, or to justify Western dominance over non-Western traditions. And those are the sources of the so-called religious wars. And it's a pattern that's now been going on. And so what's going on in the United States now reflects that history. And so I think we wrote this book to try to expose some of that and get people to think about talking about it, and why dialogue might be the most powerful way of combating that kind of destructive dualism, in which one group dominates another group, sometimes using religion to kill other groups.
I know it's always been surprising to me how little people remember what Europe was like, before the United States, in terms of the melding of religion and government, and all the destructive things that happened because of that. And, in theory, when the United States was formed, it was, religious freedom and all are equal. And, as we've all known, that was far from the case, relative to African Americans, Native Americans, et cetera, et cetera. So, I'm glad you guys are raising the weaponization of religion and, pointing that out.
Well, in medieval Europe, religion was preempted by the political powers. That included the papacy. They used religion always to achieve whatever political military ends they had. And you had to choose one or the other, and that led to conflict. And the beginning of the end of that was the establishment of the United States that declared religious freedom. That was an incredibly powerful and progressive teaching. The problem is it didn't apply to everybody, even in the United States. All people are created equal, but some more equal than others. It's been sort of the hidden assumption under that.
Well, and Paul, we saw that happen as early as the 30s and 40s with Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
How the church was used by Hitler and the Nazi Party as a means to justify what they were doing, including the extermination of millions of Jews.
Yeah. And even today, the religious right is using religion for their political ends, to achieve power, vote for Trump, vote for the conservative wing of the Republican Party, because that's God's will. And you hear that all the time, not only evangelicals, but conservative evangelical preaching and teaching. You couldn't get a job at a place like Liberty University, which is an evangelical university, if you really believed in religious freedom. You had to say, my version of Christianity is the supreme version and everybody else is wrong, and you have to judge people that way. That's been the source of a lot of conflict. It's been behind a lot of the racism in this culture. It's been behind a lot of the economic exploitation of people in this culture. And in my view, it's time to clean it up. And it's this view that energized my willingness to be part of Rick's book.
Good, good. So what all do you think are the first steps toward healing where we're at and bringing people together?
Wow. First steps. Well, what are the first steps? People have to know what's going on, and you have to. People have to be taught what's going on. I think teaching is a very important way of getting at this problem. In the churches, I think is a good place to start. You enter in dialogue with, in my case, dialogue with the Buddhist tradition. Muslims in the Mukilteo community are part of the dialogue with my church. We work together for social justice. We discover that what the Quran teaches about social justice isn't that different from what the New Testament teaches. And you can work together in spite of the doctrinal differences. And we've done that in Mukilteo. We've made some changes. My church is the center of a Muslim-Christian dialogue in this town. There's a history behind that. There was an attempt to force all Muslims to register at the police department as Muslims. And Point of Grace Lutheran Christians decided if Trump goes through this, we're going to march with our Muslim friends and register as Muslims. Because what's Christianity about? Surrendering to God's will. If you look at the prayers of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, or the Lord's Prayer, your will be done, and the Quran says anyone who surrenders to God's will is a Muslim. That's what surrender to God's will means. And so if you point out the similarities between different traditions, people will say, oh, and they'll maybe start to cooperate and work together. And that's been my experience. So for me, the main problem is education. I guess I say that because I'm an old professor. And it's an ongoing task. It never stops. And so I think this book makes that point.
Yeah, I think Paul and I wanted to show that people of different faith traditions and ethnic backgrounds have more in common than we have differences, starting with our basic humanity and love for neighbor. We noted that every major religion has as its core teaching the golden rule. And we went and really started by unpacking a key verse from the prophet Micah in the Old Testament, where the prophet writes, "And what does the Lord require of us but to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God?" And we spent the next 3 chapters exploring what does that mean for us today? What does it mean to do justice? What does it mean to love mercy? And what does it mean to walk humbly?
So in your book, you mentioned 10 ways forward. You want to talk a little bit about what some of the practical things are that you would suggest for folks?
Sure. Well, we try to end the book on a hopeful note by citing these 10 ways to bridge between people, build bridges between people, starting with self-awareness, becoming self-aware of our own prejudices. We give examples of how to participate in respectful dialogue between people of different faith traditions. We encourage people to tell their story and to listen to others tell their story. We give examples of where some of that is happening in a very successful way around the country, where different ethnic groups and different people of religious traditions are coming together to dialogue, to become more aware of one another, to even do ministry.
And affecting change in the process.
That's right.
Good, good. So maybe you can show us a copy of the book and let us know where it stands. When is it going to be released? Who's the publisher? All those good things.
Yeah. This is going to be coming out in October of this year. Chalice Press is the publisher. The World is About to Turn, and the subtitle is Mending a Nation's Broken Faith. It's a very timely topic, I would think, and it's already available for pre-order online with Amazon or with Chalice Press. In fact, if you go to Chalice Press, you can pre-order with a nice discount at this time. The website, our book has a website where you can read more about the book, about the endorsements. There's some free downloads, including you can download a study guide. The website is simply www.theworldisabouttoturn.com.
Very good, very good. So how did you guys end up getting the book deal? Did you approach Chalice about it? Did they approach you? Did you have an agent? How did that all work out?
Well, that's what Rick did. I didn't help much on that because it was done by the time I started writing.
Well, Paul,
it almost seemed that way anyway, but he just stepped in and did it.
Well, we had already come up with the concept. We had a proposal that we actually submitted to my previous publisher. They had a backlog of other similar titles, and so we went searching for another publisher. My wife, being a former publisher herself, gave us some suggestions of who to contact, and Chalice Press was one of the first ones that we contacted then, and they were very excited about the title, and they've been great to work with. They're a progressive publisher with the Disciples of Christ Church, and they published a number of progressive Christian books, and we're happy to be part of their publishing world now.
Yeah. No, I've been very impressed with the books that they're coming out with, as well as Broadleaf Books, which is part of 1517 Media, where your wife used to work.
That's right, and that's my former publisher. I have a number of books with them, and they were also excellent to work with.
Those two imprints, I'm very impressed with the things that they're coming out with, and I've been doing similar interviews with several other of the authors of new books coming out from those two publishing houses. So I'm glad that worked out for you guys.
Well, I am. That's for sure.
So what was it like to co-author a book? Most of the books that I deal with are single author books, but you guys wrote that together.
Well, it's been fun for me. It really has. It's one of the ways Rick and I have been renewing our friendship by writing together. And I've learned so much about Rick and how much his ideas correspond to mine.
Well, it does help if
but it's not just that.
Politically and religiously. But I think, since Paul and I had forged a friendship at Pacific Lutheran University, it was wonderful to kind of renew that relationship. And we started by meeting for coffee and kind of sharing ideas about the book. And then I think maybe a couple of things I think that made it easier. One is that we had great communication. We would meet together for coffee. We would email back and forth, talk on the phone. So there was ongoing communication to make sure we were both on the same page. The other thing we did is that we assigned chapters. So, because Paul's expertise is religious history and world religions, he did several chapters focused on that. I would help with some of the introduction to the chapter so that there was some continuity of writing. And then we would critique each other's work and in a positive way give suggestions to one another. And I think because of that that division of labor, but also the high respect and regard that we hold each other in, it went very smoothly.
Yeah, it was, I was impressed with how well it went. We had no problems working together. We just did it, and then as we did it, things would come up, we'd talk it over and make changes we needed to make. And they were mostly positive changes. And I never thought writing a book with somebody else could be so positive. I've co-authored essays with people, and that was much more difficult because of scholarly egos than writing the book with Rick.
Well, that's good to know. I'm glad it went so well.
I'm just very thankful he asked me to be part of it.
So, well, you were a great colleague, Paul. It's been a good team effort.
Yeah, it has been.
So just to close out, writing about politics and religion, either one, are generally difficult things to do. And here you're kind of writing about the intersection of the two. What advice do you have for other people who are interested in taking on that daunting task?
Wow. I think we were so busy figuring out how we were going to deal with that. I don't know.
Well, for me, religion and politics have always been kind of key themes that, it intersects all of life, the two. And, we live in both worlds. And so I think it was just a matter of following our passion, following our heart. We really wanted to address the concerns of our culture and find a hopeful way forward. How do we move forward as a nation? How do we move forward as congregations, as synagogues, as mosques, as people of faith from different faith traditions? And I think that having a foot in both worlds, politics and religion, we were able to kind of address those issues, again, from a faith perspective, but recognizing that, all of life has to do with our sense of morality and what's just and what's good for all people.
I want to add to that, though. I've always been interested in politics and religion. You don't get much integration with that in an academic setting at a university because disciplines are so compartmentalized. Every once in a while, you get an attempt to integrate different disciplines, different interests in a single course. Politics and religion is one that the philosophers like to teach, and I've been interested in that for a long time. But until I retired, I always thought of it as a kind of abstract issue because I was so focused on what I do. But writing the book with Rick opened doors that I didn't know were there before for me to make maybe some positive contributions and see the question in a worldwide comparative way in the world's religions. Because the same question comes up in the world's religions. If you do Confucianism, politics and religion are basically identical. You're there to create a society in which people can live. That's both a religious issue and a political one. In Buddhism, you don't get involved in society as a monk, but if you aren't a monk, you're a layperson, you get involved in the politics from a Buddhist perspective, ethical perspective. So the questions always come up. And I became aware of how universal that question is. If you're a Christian or a Jew or Muslim, and you live in a multicultural society like the United States, what is our proper response to religion and politics? And man, that's a hard question. And it haunts me to this day. So when I began to become aware of that, and writing this book with Rick, it even deepens my questions about it. I think we've opened doors, and I don't think we've solved questions, but we've opened doors for conversation. And that's the start. And if more people talk about this issue, maybe something could be done to bridge those gaps that we're talking about. Because I'll tell you, our survival as a species depends on it. Because there's so much religious justification for war and political oppression that if we don't deal with it, we're going to have a hard time.
Well, guys, I think we're going to be looking forward to this book. I appreciate you all spending some time to talk about it and familiarize us with it. Again, it's called The World is About to Turn, Mending a Nation's Broken Faith. Available from Chalice Press for pre-order now, and then the real thing in October. So guys, thanks very much, and we'll look forward to the release.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Take care.